are talking about one of my favorite topics, which is resume writing. I'm very proud to say I recently earned my Certified Professional Resume Writer designation. It's one of those goals I had for a long time, and I'm super excited to be able to share what I've learned through that process with you here. So there's a lot I'm going to try to cover in a short amount of time. I know we have some time for Q&A at the end, so I'm just going to dive in. One thing before I get into some of the do's and don'ts of resume writing, one thing I always talk to students about is trying to think about what the resume's purpose is. We all know it represents ourselves, our knowledge, our skills, our abilities, our accomplishments, but that document really isn't meant for us. It's meant for the reader. It's meant for that recruiter who hires early career folks, who knows where information is supposed to be, who's going to look at a lot of resumes for very few openings. So a lot of what I'm saying is to think about it from that person's perspective. I always ask, how long do you think that a recruiter will look at a resume? And I get varying amounts of time from students for that. But the research is a human's going to look at your resume to decide if it goes in the yes or no pile in 6 seconds. That's not a lot of time to really dive into the content. If you make it to the yes pile, they will take that deeper dive and really start reading all of your bullet points. So probably the biggest thing to think about is having a very clean, very easy to read document, completely error-free. When they are getting hundreds of resumes for one opening, one little typo, spacing error, anything is enough to put this in the trash. Mainly because if you have all of the time in the world to put this one piece of paper together that represents you and you can't get it error-free, what does that translate to how you will do work at their company, right? So with that, let's just dive into some of the basics that make your resume very clean, very easy to follow. Margins, you don't want your margins smaller than 0.5 all around. You do want it to be able to print easily because eventually they will print it. When you have an interview, you've seen them with your printed resume on their desk. Really don't want to go below 10.5. It gets hard to read for those of us who are older and need reading glasses. So you would try to keep it ideally 10.5, 11-point font, very clean, very easy to read. And everything needs to be the same size. Some people are shocked by that the category names aren't larger, but when you look at a lot of resumes quickly, when things are different sizes, they will jump out of your eyes in a bad way. You will use formatting such as capitalization, bolding, italics, underlining, whatever you like to make your category stand out from the rest of the content, but still keep it easy on the eyes. Of course, you know that not have paragraphs, you'll have everything in bullet point form. At this stage of your career, it should definitely be one page. They are not looking at page 2 in 6 seconds. And the general rule is 1 page per 10 years. So, and the other item you see on here is no text boxes. And that's going to have me talk a little bit more about the applicant tracking systems, but you want a very clean, easy to read document so the applicant tracking system can pick it up. Sometimes they ask for a PDF, which is wonderful, but sometimes they ask for a text or a Word document, and you really want to make sure the robot can read the information because if it can't, it's never getting to the human. And I listed here some of the standard font types for resume writing. If you're a business student, Times New Roman is by far the safest, the most conservative, and most standard font type for a resume. I've heard some employers say they look down on Calibri, mainly because it's the default font type for Word, and it doesn't really show much creativity. So diving in, a little more of the layout item, very consistent formatting. These aren't sentences, so there should not be periods at the end of your bullet points. They are sentence fragments. And the spacing everywhere on your resume needs to match. This is probably one of my big pet peeves, the spacing between categories. I know sometimes students start to run out of room and then the bottom of the resume gets really smushy. You don't want to do that, as it has to be consistent everywhere. And dates. I have on the PowerPoint here some different ways you could write dates. Every single date on the resume needs to be the same exact format. All of these I'm showing you are correct. It doesn't matter what you like. You just need to make sure every single date is consistent. If you have an honor section, if you have an activity section, your experience section, everything needs to be the exact same way. And that could be one of those errors that put you in the no pile if they're not consistent. So at this stage, you are all in college, and you will be looking for a position at some point because you are graduating. So your heading and your personal information comes first, immediately followed by education. That is why you will be looking for a position. Really make sure your degree and degree information is written correctly the same way it would appear on a transcript, because some employers will ask to verify everything through your transcript. If you are earning a Bachelor of Science, it is singular, it is not plural, it does not have an apostrophe S. Same thing with a Bachelor of Arts, it's the same thing as a singular degree. One thing I see a lot would be the majors. If you have multiple majors, the word major actually needs to be plural. And I get GPA quite a bit. The standard rule, as most of you probably know, list your GPA if it's over a 3.0. You definitely don't round up. A 2.98 does not become a 3.0, unfortunately. However, I know sometimes you may have had a rough freshman year, or you might have started off freshman year in one major, which is really hard, and you've changed majors. So your cumulative GPA might not be over a 3. However, your major GPA might be really strong, and you would like to show that off. Unfortunately, you should not just list the higher GPA. If you only say in your resume, accounting GPA, an employer will wonder what you're hiding, how low is your cumulative GPA. So on the slides, I've showed you a really clean way to answer that question and have it listed on your resume. If you have more than one major, I would just suggest not saying major GPA, because no one will know which major you're talking about. I would list the majors that you're actually tailoring your resume for. And we will definitely talk a lot more about tailoring your resume. Just a couple more slides on the basics. Because recruiters are looking at your resume for 6 seconds, you want to ideally align locations and dates on the right margin. That's where they expect to see it. And company names and job titles on the left margin. It looks more polished if you fully write out the months. I know people like to abbreviate. I see students getting into trouble. You might abbreviate September because it's long, but maybe not abbreviate March, or maybe not abbreviate June. So it gets a little tricky when you start abbreviating months. It just looks a lot more polished, all fully written out. And beginning bullets with a strong action verb. Not assisted, not helped, not aided. They actually don't tell us what your role was. And this resume is all about you and all about what your knowledge, skills, abilities, and accomplishments are. So you really want to focus on your action for those things. You might flip it around, analyze financial statements as part of the XYZ project, or I'm just giving you a brief example, but instead of starting with assisted with, you would end more that way. And I hope that would help a little bit. Now, I know oftentimes college students might not have a lot of relevant work experience for their field. Hopefully, all of you are taking advantage of internships and work experiences to get that hands-on experience. But project experience is another great way to add those technical, I call them KSEs, knowledge, skills, and experiences onto your resume. To showcase to an employer, you have this knowledge, you could do the job even though you weren't in an employer situation getting paid for it at this point. It's where instead of having a relevant coursework section, which I usually do not recommend having, they could look at your transcript if they want to see your coursework. Project experience will really let you elaborate on the nature of the project, what you did using industry terminology, again, getting those keywords, those KSEs onto your resume. So this is a brief example from one of the courses at the university I work at. Some other resume best practices, resume writing tends to be its own little language. It doesn't always make sense. You would spell out numbers 1 to 9, and all of these things you are probably thinking, Lisa, sounds pretty petty. But when the market is so competitive and hundreds of candidates going for 1 or 2 roles, all of these little details that are completely within your control make a big difference. So you would be on a team of 3, THREE. Or you could be on a team of 13, 1, 3, which would be the numbers. If you're talking about dollars or percentages, you definitely would use the numeric format of the number. I know all of you know to not start your bullet points with the word I, not a sentence. However, you also need to be very conscious of removing personal pronouns from the entire bullet point. Not our client, our team, they did this, them, that, it. Those are all personal pronouns and they all need to be removed. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thinking on how to reword what you want to say without those little words in there, but it could definitely be done. And I would say rely on your Career Center if you really get stuck. That's what they're there for. And I would say if they also recommend a specific template you use, because some universities do that, just be sure to follow their guidelines, but you can really flesh out the bullet points and tailor it, as I'm really going to talk about. And of course, reverse chronological order. Anything to present would be first on your resume. Now diving down into the meat, how are you really going to stand out? Really tailoring your resume to the target. What types of jobs are you applying to with this resume? What are the buzzwords for your industry? If you're an accounting student, are you talking about financial statements? Are you talking about the 10K? Are you talking about stocks? You want to make sure keywords are built into your resume. Sometimes you might not be sure exactly the best way to do that. And looking up job descriptions, even if they're not jobs you want to apply to, they might not be the right location. They might be the job you want 5 years from now. Take a look and see what kind of words are in those job descriptions. What are the phrases? These are the kinds of things you need to start working into your resume as well as your LinkedIn profile. And speaking of LinkedIn, definitely use LinkedIn. There are jobs you can look for on LinkedIn as well, but look at people who have the job you aspire to. How are their profiles worded? What types of bullet points do they have? What are they articulating about? And really trying to get some of that into your resume whenever possible, because you want it to be captured by that ATS, the applicant tracking system. All of this is applied to a job online where you have to input a lot of information and upload your resume. What really happens is artificial intelligence is scrubbing your resume, trying to find a percentage match. So the recruiter might have said, return any resumes with an 80% match to this list of keywords. And if it's not on your resume, you won't get picked up. Or if the format's not easy for the computer to read, it won't get picked up. So that goes back to just a plain Word document with all the information there, no text boxes, no templates that you purchase that might have hard coding in it that the ATS can't read. This is the #1 way to really set yourself apart from everybody else. It's called writing accomplishment statements or impact statements. All of your bullet points probably now tell me what you did, the verb and the task. However, I'm going to challenge all of you to get past that. Tell me why you did it. Tell me how you did it. Tell me the results of what you did. I want to know the impact. I don't want to know things that any human who would have that job would do. I want to know your impact there. And so there are some probing questions here to think about it. I usually say who, what, when, why, where, how. Try to fully flesh it out. And yes, your bullet points are going to be longer, and that's perfectly fine. They could go on to 2 lines. However, you're going to have less of them. You're not going to list 8 bullet points. That's basically your job description. You're going to list maybe 5, maybe 6 if it's a very relevant job, and you are going to fully flesh those bullet points out. If you are visual, here's another example of a bullet point broken out along the who, what, when, where, why, how. Forecasted 2015 tax liability for up to 50 clients to develop tax planning strategies and on-time tax payments adhering to IRS rules and regulations, resulting in an average of 15% savings per client. I know, I hear you. You're saying, Lisa, I don't always have results. Didn't always save money. I didn't always save time, and that's okay. Whenever you have, you want to, but if you can even quantify number of people you work with, number of clients you work with, did you do this daily, weekly, monthly? I want you to at least get 3 of those 4, and you will have a much more well-written bullet point that would stand out to an employer. Because you want to stand out to an employer by the content, not always by the formatting. 9 times out of 10, if your resume is standing out because of the formatting, it's probably bad. So you really want to focus on keeping it clean, easy to read, and focus on the content. I know I flew through that. I was trying to stick to the timeline. I wanted to save some time for questions. So I am happy to answer questions, and hopefully you have some happy resume writing.
Thank you for that overview and explanation, Lisa. Very much appreciated.